Hello everybody and welcome to the second Fun Fridays video. Now, this one's also themed on Dystopian Wars. Wasn't exactly my intention to make Fun Fridays always Dystopian Wars, where there will be other Fun Friday stuff, but the first one was, and as it turned out, Warcradle Studios, the people who now own the Dystopian Wars IP, saw that video and they contacted me and they said, "Oh, would you like a free copy of the new starter set, Hunt for Prometheus?" And, well, since I'd already pre-ordered a copy myself, because, you know, I collect this particular IP, I was like, yes, of course. And, well, weirdly enough, my preview copy showed up about a week before the one that I actually paid for. So I now have two, which is great because that means I now have twice as many ships, which is always good, although it also means twice as much painting, and more on that particular part later. So yes, I did want to get this video out a little bit sooner, but for completeness' sake, I did want to actually get, you know, everything in place. I wasn't, in the end, able to paint everything, but I was able to paint enough to give a good idea of how things should work, similar to what I did previously. So, that's basically the delay. It's been a bit busy past few weeks, and also, well, this is a starter set, so there's considerably more in terms of models in there than there was in the preview section that they sent out, which was just a couple of escorts and a cruiser, but more on that later. So this is the box you get. Hunt for the Prometheus 2-player starter set between the Russian Commonwealth and the Enlightenment, or as I call them, the Antarcticans, because that's where they're based. And that's what they were called. Well, they used to be called Covenant of Antarctica. Now they're called the Enlightenment, whatever. And this is what it looks like on the back of the box. Tells you what you get. Now, this is actually quite an interesting thing for me as a wargames collector, in that for a starter set, the two sides are not mirror-matched, which is something you see quite a lot in various wargames. But as you can see in this case, the Russians have a battleship, 5 cruisers, and 10 escorts. The Antarcticans have 2 capital ships that look different to each other, and then only 3 cruisers and 9 escorts. So they're down an escort and 2 cruisers, but they gain a capital ship. Plus, of course, there's all these other gubbins you can see listed on the side of the box there. So let's have a quick dive in and see what we get in the box. So first up, you get this thing, which is a sprue containing a variety of different bits and pieces. You'll notice that I did actually take into account some of your feedback when you're talking about, yeah, maybe mottled grey carpeting is not the best of things to be showing this stuff on. Since I filmed this, I have actually got an even better actual black flock display mat, which will hopefully look better in future videos if I am showing off more wargame stuff. But cut everything up and it yields this thing, which looks like a combination template of some description. That, which is a turning measurement unit of some description, and this rather interesting foldy thing, which appears to be some kind of range ruler. You also get this rule book, which is a campaign book, I guess. The stat cards, etc. for the ships are available on the Dystopian Wars website, but some nice artwork, bit of campaign descriptions, various scenarios available to you, all that other kind of good stuff. So that's nice. There's a separate rulebook. I've had a good look through that, but I'm not going to read that all out to you now, but it's there. You also get these dice. Then you get 12 of those in 2 little packets. You get these dice, which are completely separate, and there's a lot of them. So plenty of dice to work with. You will need separate D6, but I'm pretty sure most people have a D6 or a few lying around. Those bases, I guess they're for some part of the ships. These little templates, well, scenery effectively, cardboard scenery, icebergs, wrecked ships, that kind of stuff. Punch those out quite easily. All of these various tokens, again, cardboard, just punch them out quite happy to have those. And some of these Victory and Valor cards. They're kind of like objective cards that give you various bits and pieces to do, score points, I guess. I'll find out more once I've played a few games under this new system. So, what about the ships? Well, this nice wodge of sprues you might recognise from the previous video. This is the Russian Commonwealth cruiser and escort sprue. So you get 2 escorts and 1 cruiser, which you can build in quite a lot of different ways, and you get 5 of them. So it's nice and repeatable. Makes it actually quite easy to chain them together when you're putting them together. And you get 3 of these, which are the Enlightenment equivalent. You have the 1 cruiser again, but this time you have 3 escorts and 1 little base of smaller, I guess, token units per sprue. So that's how you end up with the totals. Then you've got this, which is one of the Antarctican capital ships, and another, and the Russian one as well. Those are all resin. All the big capital ships are resin cast, so you can make do with obviously just super glue. That will work on both in theory, but more on that later. But I probably advise having liquid poly and super glue. So this is the hull of the Russian battleship, fresh out of its bubble wrap. It looks fairly decent. Got a little smokestack there and a bridge, and that is pretty much it. You've got the 3 turret points there, but the turrets come on the cruiser and escort sprues because there's an awful lot more turrets and generators on there than you're ever going to use on the cruisers. So that's it for the Russian ship. Well, let's have a look at the Antarctican ones, or Enlightenment ones. So here's one. This appears to have quite a few mounting points. You see it's got 3 sort of bowl mounting points and 3 mounting points that look more like the ones on the Russian ship. So I'm going to guess that those are generators. You've got these extra bits. So you've got a bridge, you've got a couple of fins and a smokestack, and the fins you can see slot in next to the smokestack. I did kind of, for seeing how simple this could get, I wanted to see how much of this can I put together without actually having a look at the instructions, because there are downloadable PDF instructions online. But anyway, so here's the other one, the other Antarctican vessel. It has 3 of these bowl-shaped mounting points, and at the moment 3 of these big tube things and a gap on the side. Similar side vanes, smokestack, but you've now got some extra pieces. So one's obviously another tube, the bridge, and some extra gubbins that will go on somewhere, presumably in relation to this tube. I remember at this point I'm looking and going, I wonder how much of this I can put together without looking at the instructions, because I do like simple kits that you can put together in that way, because I think if you can design a kit that someone can look at and see instinctively, yep, this is how it goes together, that's a big tick mark. It doesn't necessarily always have to be that way, but it is a good thing. And in that vein, you can see me here test fitting the Russian battleship. Nice little bridge tower, smokestack goes on, and there you go. Pretty simple and easy. Although I would recommend painting the smokestack separately before putting it in. Now this is what I'm going to term Antarctican battleship, again, before looking at the instructions. And yep, smokestack, fairly obvious, goes in there. And these little side panels, these turned out to be a little bit tricky. It's fairly easy to tell from the box art and from the obvious little side notches where they go. But if you have sausage fingers, they are going to be somewhat more difficult to put in. They're nice, good, chunky bits of resin, though, so if you've got a pair of plastic tweezers or whatever, they should be fine. Me trying to reach around the camera here whilst kneeling down had a little bit more trouble with them than I in this footage than I actually did when it came to properly fitting them, but you can see how that goes together. And then you've got the bridge tower, or dish, I guess, and that's nicely aligned. Pops on there. So, yeah, that was also pretty easy to do. And you can see, again, I would strongly recommend painting that rear superstructure area and the smokestack before you put the fins on. which I think is part of the reason why they come separate. And then we come to the last Antarctican capital ship. So again, we have these little fin things on the side and the smokestack. So this was, again, all fairly obvious from the box art on how it all went together. And you can see the quality of the resin casting and moulding is actually very good. I was quite impressed with this. There are some companies, who shall remain nameless, that do have something of a reputation for some rather odd castings and misalignments, rough castings, etc. And I couldn't see any evidence of that on these. Actually, very minimal flash as well, which is quite nice and useful. So this crane fairly obviously sat in there. That was a fairly easy one to figure out. Then you've got, this is obviously whatever this tube thing is, except open. That, again, kind of sits over there. It did come broken. This little tiny piece is pretty much the only thing I can find fault with in terms of the resin casting. It came slightly broken, and it seems to be very slightly oversized for what it's supposed to be doing. I don't know whether that was just a fault with this test one. Maybe at some point I'll have a look with my other one and see if that casting was a bit better. Bridge tower, again, goes on pretty obviously. It's got this kind of D-shaped thing, so there's no way you can put it in the wrong way round. But yeah, that's pretty much that. There is only one other component to this ship, apart from obviously the gun turrets. And that is this thing. So it turns out whatever's in the center and this, which is supposed to attach to the crane, seems to be some kind of cybernetic whale, which I suppose is a good way of scaling the ship as well. So I suppose that's fairly dystopian, but yeah, there you can see it's probably a cybernetic sperm whale of some description. Anyway, so he obviously sits on the crane. They're presumably lowering him into place to do whatever it is he does for the Enlightenment. I hope he gets good health insurance. And then that brings us on to the new cruiser and escort sprue, as opposed to the Russian one we saw before. And as you can see here, you've got 3 escorts and that little drone token there. Bunch of these kind of ball turret things. So detaching from that, we have the little drone disc thing, which is trying to get away from me. Appears to be 3 little dart drones, and there's all the various turrets. Say the knobbly one is a pulse wave launcher, according to the box, and most of the rest of them are fairly standard energy turrets of some description. So you get quite a few of those. They do tend to run away a little bit, so probably keep them safe when you detach them. And then we have the escort. It's 2 halves, actually even simpler than the Russian one. Both of them have 2 halves of a hull that go together. This one just then has the back plate, whereas the Russian escort has a hull, deck plate and a bridge, although you do have to drop in a turret of your choice for the escort. And then when you put it together, you end up with this little lovely thing. So that's 1 escort. Pretty quick and easy. Basically just 2 lines that you need to put glue on. And as you can see, the little ball turret just kind of drops in there. And that is all you need to do to assemble 1 Enlightenment escort. And that rapidly becomes 3 off of a single sprue. That took 2-3 minutes to do, probably, in total. And of course, as I say, you can fit them with either the pulse wave launcher or the energy turret. There are more energy turrets than pulse wave launchers, but in this case I thought I'm just going to drop in the energy turrets one by one. That's probably actually the single fiddliest and longest part of things, and even then it only takes a matter of seconds. And because they sit in quite nicely kept by gravity, you don't have to stick them in. You can have the turrets loose, so if you want to switch back and forth, you can do. And there you go. So 2 with the energy turret and 1 with the little pulse wave launcher at the end. And this is what you have left when you have taken all the escort bits and the turrets out of the sprue. So this is the cruiser. And that yields this many parts. So at this point, I was trying to identify what these various parts were. So obviously you've got forward part of the hull, rear part of the hull, what The superstructures, I think this is how it all goes together. Stern is fairly obvious, and then various fixtures and fittings, because like the Russian cruisers, you can assemble different forms of weaponry. Now, whilst the Russians had been pretty easy to build, and the escorts, as you can see here, that is literally the entire instruction sheet for the escorts. They're pretty easy to build for the Enlightenment. The cruisers were the first thing I came across where I couldn't figure out how to construct them without actually, looking at the instructions. And so I did. I went through, and you can see them coming up now. And it turns out that, like the Russian cruisers, there are many ways of building them. In this case, the variant choice is not so much about hull length, it's about what you have on the stern and in the superstructure. So the hull just goes together one way, and your first hull option, as you can see here, is two big bowl-shaped turret mounts, one fore and one aft. And then if you go with that, you have a couple of different choices. You can either have this big energy turret in the middle, or you can have this launcher platform, which is the launcher for those little circular token things that we saw earlier. And again, you can put whatever energy turret, pulse launcher, etc. on the two main mounts as per your choice. And if you don't want anything particularly fancy in midships, you can also put on this lower level bridge structure, which looks quite snazzy, reduces your target profile, and presumably you will hopefully cost less points. Your other base option starts out with the same basic hull, but instead of putting that deep bowl-shaped turret mount on the back, you put this smaller back plate on, and this carries what appears to be sort of a half-sized energy gun, or energy cannon. And this, in turn, can yield a number of further variants. Once again, you can have the big central superstructure with the energy cannon or the drone launcher, or you can have this one, which is the stiletto, and this appears to be the lightest armed of all the cruiser variants, and therefore, presumably, in theory, the least points, as it only has the one main turret up front, then a bridge structure, and then the dinky little turret aft. Now, this is where I feel I must offer some constructive criticism. The Enlightenment escorts flew together really easily. Russian escorts, Russian cruisers, as we saw in the previous video, flew together really easily. These cruisers were a bit of a pig to put together. I think it's because of that very pronounced slope. If you try and hold them together, they either end up collapsing down if you put a little bit too much pressure higher up, or they end up folding in on themselves if you try and pinch them at the bottom, whereas whilst still somewhat tumble-homed but more vertical style Russian ships, when it comes to their hulls, they don't tend to suffer from quite that same level of problem. The other thing, and this is what I said near the beginning of the video about using liquid poly for the plastic stuff instead of just super glue generally, which is what I did for the test Russian sprue, is these things, whether it's the plastic, whether it's me, or whatever, whether it's possibly the shape and the setting time, they do not seem to like super glue at all. Liquid poly is by far the better way of putting these things together. At first I thought possibly I had a dodgy super glue, but I tried 3 different super glues trying to assemble 2 of the cruisers, and before eventually giving up and going over to the liquid poly. Now, I hadn't assembled all of the escorts, but I did end up assembling all of the cruisers. You can see that one in the middle has a considerable amount of dried and smeared super glue on it. You've got the top one there, which is kind of the heaviest version, that middle one there, which is the lightest version, and then this drone launcher variant in the middle, which is kind of a middle version. And I thought that probably presents a good range of the various options that you've got. Now, the middle one obviously is a bit fixed. The top and bottom ones there, you can actually pull out the energy turret or the drone launcher and swap them over. And then, because it was so easy and quick, I put together all the other escorts, and this is the plastic element of the fleet. And then you can see over there the 2 resin elements of the Enlightenment fleet, and my awful camera work. Now, as with the Russian sprues I showed you before, I got out some of my old Spartan Dystopian Wars models to show kind of how they match up, how they fit with the aesthetic, and you can see there's definitely a sort of crossover. They blend in fairly well on visual inspection, but I decided not to go ahead with either of these 2 pre-existing colour schemes I had. I'm not the world's biggest fan of them. They were alright at the time, but the colours are a bit too close to the Russian colour scheme for my taste these days. And so I did a bit of an experiment. I did kind of want them to be white, because I thought, well, Antarctica, ice, white, should look fairly nice. I've never been able to pull off a decent white colour scheme before. So off I went, found some undercoat primer, decided to go with using some contrast paints as well. So I thought, right, let's use the contrast undercoat primer. That's from Games Workshop. And promptly completely messed up which one looks like the pale off-white and used the Wraithbone instead of the Grey Seer, and so I actually got beige ships. But, oh well, live and learn. I wasn't about to strip them all down anyway, so I painted up a couple of the escorts, as you can see at the back, using the beige undercoat. Gave one a kind of a steel blue weathering powder, and I also painted up a couple of potentially alternate colour schemes. The silvery one, I used a mirror paint. That's the Mirroriest Mirror Paint. I think that's how it's pronounced, from Stuart Semple, just to see what would happen if I could get a nice chrome effect. And also used Black 3.0 on the nearest ship, just to see how that would work. See if there was... well, it's kind of throwing ideas around, see which paint colour scheme I might actually prefer to go forward with for the whole fleet. And in the end, I decided that the pale colour scheme was probably the best one to go for, so that's this one here. So I set off with the goal of starting to paint up the Antarctican or Enlightenment fleet in that colour scheme, and that uses a number of different paints, which I shall describe for you a bit later. But before that, I thought, well, since I've already painted the Russian escorts and Russian cruisers, so you already have an idea what that looks like, let's do the easy thing and paint up the Russian battleship, so all of that is complete. And I've got to admit, the result was one beautiful looking ship. I think, given that it's literally a 4-colour paint scheme plus some weathering powder, I really lucked into this combination. I really like the look of this battleship. As you can see there, there's the cruiser without guns that I painted up from the test sprue, and to get some idea of relative size, I gave this one all sort of the rail cannon turrets, and that's pretty much what it looks like. As I said, I think I'm very, very happy with that particular ship as it came out. But then it was back to the Enlightenment, so I tackled the battleship first, and that seemed to go relatively well. I now apologise because it's back to the grey carpet, mainly because I think the contrast with the grey carpet is slightly less, so it makes the colours come out slightly different in the camera. So that gives you an idea of both kinds of capital ship completed there. That was a fairly fun exercise, relatively speaking easy to do. And that all comes together like so. So these are all the ones now painted up in the colour scheme that I chose, with an interloper there, which I'll explain later. As this is, if you ignore the various spare parts of Russian cruise in the background, this is the full Enlightenment fleet that you get in the starter set. So you can see there are my 2 test escorts there. The rest of the escorts unpainted because I proved the concept with the first 2. 3 cruisers, a couple of capital ships there, and the 3 token units at the back. And these are all the colours that I used in the Enlightenment paint scheme. Now, don't be too intimidated. The Russians, as I say, were 4-colour paint scheme plus weathering powder. This is not actually as extensive as it looks, because the contrast basilicum grey and the silver metal paint pen, because yes, I decided to use a paint pen in some places, those were only used on the Descartes, basically the whale launching ship. So basic paint process was, once it had been undercoated, a quick coat of Apothecary White to give it a little bit of contrast, and then the Hexwraith Flame over there, the green on the right, that was what was used for the engine blocks and the energy turret outputs. The Nighthaunt Gloom, that's the blue on the right, that was used for the windows and basically anything that looked like a viewing slit or a glowing, potentially, grid on the back of some of the ships. You've then got the Griff Charger Grey. Apart from providing some colour for the poor old cybernetic whales, that was the colour that I used basically to give a little bit of a darker hue to the energy turrets themselves. Then you've got this colour shifting Celestial Azure off on the left. I stuck that on all of the weapons, whether they be the ball turrets or the whale launching tubes, after everything else was dry, just to give it a little bit of a sheen, a little bit of colour effect. That's mainly for my own purposes because I think it looks cool. And then these two other paint pens at the bottom, and you've got the Fireslayer Flesh. So that, although it's supposed to be a flesh shade, actually comes out a reasonably decent brown colour, so I used that for the decks, mostly. I also used it for various bits of pipe work and the smokestacks, etc., because it actually, on the Wraithbone contrast, comes out a copperish colour, which I could then touch up a bit with the copper paint pen, which gave it a nice metallic sheen without having to go through every single nook and cranny, and give it that sort of final steampunk copper effect, which I thought, again, was quite nice. The Mechanicum Grey went on the crane of the whale launching ship, and the silver paint pen there was just used to pick out a few highlights on that. I also picked out some panel lines on the escorts and the capital ships using the Fireslayer Flesh. I did actually forget to do that on the cruisers, but here you go, you can see the effect on the cruisers here. Now, you might notice that one at the back, that's not one of the ones that came in the box set. That's one of the older Spartan Games cruisers, which I've included here, painted up in the same colour scheme to show, again, kind of how it fits in if you happen to have a pre-existing collection. And as you can see, there are some differences. They've made a few changes, but it doesn't, if they're all in the same colour scheme, it doesn't detract, I think, from the aesthetic. They're going to blend in relatively well. They also have counts as lists on the various orders of battle on the Warcradle website, which will tell you sort of what this thing at the back is equivalent to. I suspect it's broadly equivalent to the energy ball turret cruiser, which conveniently in this photo I've managed to have just intruding its bow on the bottom left. And you can also see at the back there I painted up one of the old Spartan escorts that seemed the most similar to the new Warcradle escorts. And again, so you can see it kind of all blends in very thematically. And so here's that recalcitrant cruiser and one of the little escorts. One of the ones I actually painted up completely. I will paint up all the others, but I thought better to show you what I've done so far, and I think I covered all the bases, rather than delay this another week while I go and paint up another several dozen ships. And then here you've got the capital ships with another escort. You see here I put the generators on, as well as the turrets, and yes, the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that those two wing generators on this ship are not apparently actually legal. They're the one set of generators that the Enlightenment cannot actually use, but nevertheless I thought they were cool, so for aesthetic purposes I stuck them on, and well, I'll just have to substitute them in for something else when it comes to actually playing a game. And here's the Russian half of the game set. So I tried to assemble the 5 cruisers in as many different potential ways as I could without obviously looking at various turret variations. So you've got the 5 cruisers in their different formats there, although 2 of them are the same because there's 4 basic hull formats. Then you've got the various escorts and the battleship there, which I painted up, as I said, because I've already painted a cruiser and a set of escorts, so I just needed to paint the battleship to show you what that looked like. And then we have that on the board, the blackboard. There is the full contents of everything you get in the Hunt for the Prometheus starter set as far as ship models are concerned. You can see there's a whole load of hull sections for the Russian cruisers spare sitting there behind the Enlightenment stuff, and that's basically because I put these cruisers together, complete set of variety for your benefit, so you can see what you get. But I'm not sure what cruiser variants I'm going to go with, so I'm keeping those spare hull pieces around so I can make a decision eventually what I want to do with them, if indeed I even want to stick them together, because as you'll know from the previous video, you can actually just detach and reattach them and put them together in all sorts of ways. And so here I got out a couple of Russian battleships, a couple of Russian escorts, etc. from the Spartan Games period, as well as the cruiser and 2 escorts I painted up previously. So you can see how it all matches together. And you can see on the front row there how the old and new battleships are actually incredibly similar. They blend together incredibly well, to the point that if it hadn't been for the fact I used a slightly darker grey paint for some reason when I was painting that battleship there on the right, the older Spartan one, you'd be very hard pressed to say that they aren't just variations on a theme. Well, they pretty much are, but yeah, what I'm getting at is if you have a pre-existing Russian fleet collection, I think these new ships are going to blend in very well with that. And over there you can see a full fleet shot of the Enlightenment stuff with a few bits and pieces from the old Spartan style sprinkled in. So once again, I think you're not going to have too many problems integrating your pre-existing forces there either. And so overall, I would say I'm pretty happy with the way these ships have come out, and I'm pretty happy with the overall quality of the starter set. The only criticisms, as I said, are I think that kind of protective grid on the middle of the whale launching ship seems to have, at least in this particular box, been cast a little bit too large and a little bit fragile, but I'll see what the one that I paid for is like and see if it was maybe a one-off issue. And as I said before as well, assembling the Enlightenment cruisers is a little bit of a pig. Once I got the liquid poly out, to be fair, and I had the very frustrating experience of trying to put the first 2 together with superglue, the third one did go together a lot easier, so I suspect when I get around to putting together my box set, the one that I pre-ordered, I think that's going to go together a lot quicker. But they are, of all the ships in this box set, the hardest to deal with. But considering all the others are so easy to put together, I literally didn't actually need to look at the instructions except to find out what they're actually called. It's not exactly a world-ending problem. And so that is pretty much that for today. Thank you very much for listening, if indeed you have reached this far into the video. That's my sort of look at, review, painting of most of the relevant bits of the Hunt for the Prometheus 2-player starter set for Dystopian Wars. There is a release schedule. The next ones up are going to be the Germans, so hopefully I'll be able to show you those at some point in the future. But as I said, the purpose of Fun Fridays is not to be just the Dystopian Wars segment. Fun Fridays is supposed to be for me to talk to you, show you various things naval related that don't strictly fit within the format of the 3 regular videos that you get each week, and of course therefore as a result Fun Fridays will also not be a feature that you'll get every week, but when I have the time then you will. So on that note, if you're happy to see more Dystopian Wars stuff, great, fantastic, let me know that. If you'd also want to see other stuff, and I do want to show you other stuff as I said, then let me know what other stuff would you like me to show you. I can show you there's a bunch of stuff I got from Warlord Games, the Age of Sail stuff they do, Black Sails, and Victory at Sea, their World War II tabletop war game. I can show you those. I've got various much larger warship model kits at varying stages of construction. There's various bits of naval paraphernalia you've probably seen in the background of various live streams. I could show you that. I could show you around the library if you really, really want. There's a few interesting bits of source material I've got poking around. Various photos I've taken over the years at various naval museums. Or we could just talk about other stuff that's, let's say, naval related, but not strictly in the vein of the main channel segments. So I think as long as we can draw some kind of tangential relationship to naval related stuff, I'm perfectly happy to show you it on Fan Fridays if that's what you want to see, even if there's naval related computer games or whatever. As I say, I don't want to make Fun Fridays a kind of Oh yeah, this is a day in the life of Drac, because let's face it, you're here for naval history, you're here for things related to naval history. Some of you might want, for whatever reason, to see what Drac gets up to when he's not researching and making videos, etc. But I can assure you, well, some parts of it might be relatively exciting, as and when I get back to doing medieval reenactment and such like, but I do want to keep the focus of this channel naval, so naval stuff, please, as suggestions. Anyway, I think I've occupied enough of your time on this fine evening, or at least I think that's what it's going to be when this video gets released. So thank you very much for watching once again, and see you again in another video.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.